What's up everyone, this is Cher talking, welcome back to my channel. On today's video, I'll be making a full review for the 4th Anniversary Appreciation Romancing Festival Albert banner that brings Albert, that is a support unit for normal squads, but even better for Sun squads. Sif, that is a slash and cold damage dealer that tries to compete with Kihachi. Claudia, that is a pierce damage dealer, and Jamil, that is a special debuffer that can be either amazing or mediocre. Well, let's start talking about Albert. He gives the name to the banner. He has 100% endurance, agility, and will. Those status are just good, nothing amazing. 120% SCR is also just good, and nothing really stands out on this character. He even has intelligence because he can instant kill, but that is long gone. Now, on the start of a turn, he casts Heat Up of 15%, increasing damage for the whole fight 3 times, and Defense Up of medium effect, decreasing damage taken by 10% for the whole fight. He also recovers 1 BP, but that's just to self. The interesting point is that the second latest building had an interesting setup where she would take 10 turns to cast 3 defense ups of medium effect. Now Albert can do that in 3 turns. That's power creep for you, my friend. But now Albert has also 30% damage increase for all allies at all times. So if you sum all of it, he increases damage potential of everyone by 75%. That's interesting. And also when he attacks with Sun attacks, he recovers another 2 BP. And that makes him a 6 BP per turn character. He does have another 40% damage increase at all times, and also a 30% damage reduction at all times. So his total damage passives are 115%. Now, also on the start of a round, he will cast Light Clad. That is a passive that will be for 5 turns in the whole squad, and when your characters are landing Sun attacks, they will buff their will by 15%. They will also buff their ailment resistances by large effect, and they will also cast a defense boost of medium effect. The JP says is 20% damage reduction just for that turn. Also, when you are attacked, you're going to buff STR, Dexterity, Agility, and Intelligence, as you can see all of the offensive status, and will also grant yourself an attack boost. That will increase damage potential by 10%, lasts for 2 turns, but if the enemy attacks after you, this effect will only last for the next turn. Okay, so the good thing is that it buffs will, but the offensive status are for all types, but just 5%. So it takes time to scale. At least the will effect can increase a lot if your characters have chase attacks, but they have to be Sun attackers as well. So someone like Matriarch that cannot chase as much as 2 times can buff her will by, for example, 45% because of Albert. But some other characters just don't attack much. If you're using Albert together with Leon, Leon can buff his will now by 30%. See, there is some utility, and the bad part's that Albert competes with Leon, and Leon is such a good character. Okay, and that effect will be active for 5 turns. Now, you want to keep casting this skill, right? Yes, you can do that by use of skill 3, Light Clad Impact. That is a fast single target attack with Slash and Sun, just as power but costs 9 BP, and then it will cast Light Clad for 2 turns. Okay, so you have 1 permanent for 5 turns, and then you are going to cast another, so all the effects will be doubled, right? The problem is that Albert doesn't have such a high agility. Look, just 100%. The attack is fast, I understand, but there are so many fast attackers these days that you may not be the first one. So look, Matriarch, for example, she has a fast skill that you want to use all the time, and that skill is Lance Dance, because this casts damage increase and also damage reduction effects, and her agility is much higher, 115%. Now, what about Leon, another character that we use a lot? Leon has very bad agility. At least Leon is going to attack after Albert most of the time. But in some situations, you will have to place your fast attackers in the back of some formations. But, for example, Imperial Cross is a formation that doesn't really help much in this. Rising King and Rising Phoenix do help because you can decrease agility of some specific units. Okay, but that is interesting because then you are going to buff your will by 30% when landing a Sun attack. That is interesting, right? But it also requires you to have a full squad that attacks and also use Sun attacks. we already have one character that is also a Sun Specialist, the latest Final Impress. What does she offer to the party when using Sun attacks? You will recover 3 BP, and also they will cast a defense boost, but this time to everyone. That decreases 15% of damage for 1 turn. So, depending, it would be better to just bring Impress, because defense boost to everyone, everyone can attack, and that will stack. This only triggers 1 time only, while Albert doesn't have a limit. He can allow characters to keep buffing as much as they have attacks. So, there's this difference between them. And because it's 9 BP cost, you have usually 6 BP per turn. If you are using Albert together with Impress, you're going to have 9 BP already, so he can cast this skill twice in a row, for example. And then, in the first 5 turns, you can have 3 stacks of light clad impact. So, it will be good for a start, because in the start of a fight you don't have that many buffs stacked, but if the enemy removes your buffs, this won't be so good. But it's something to consider, and especially because you will then be buffing your ailment resistance multiple times. Albert competes with Beauty as an ailment resistance buffer. Beauty is another character that will be very useful in the future, because she can use a skill that gives you ailment resistance, but when attacked. And you can get attacked more often than attacking the enemy. Yeah, some enemies can attack like 6 times, for example. It's more easier to find an enemy that attacks multiple times than one that attacks, I don't know, 1 or 2 times these days. And she also applies 1 damage block and action order up. That is a pretty interesting buff for the future, along another ailment resistance buff on cast. So Beauty is a better ailment resistance buffer, and there is also Muse, that is the most common one as well. But, well, I feel like people are not using Muse as much, because Beauty just dropped it and is replacing her. Now, the thing is, without Sun attacks, Albert utility decreases a lot. Remember that you need to land a Sun attack. But the part that, when being attacked, that buffs STR, Dexterity, Agility, and Intelligence doesn't have anything to do with Sun. But it's just 5% buff and 10% attack boost. But now, after using the skill number 3, you will then trigger other effects. That's pretty interesting. A defense boost that will decrease damage taken by 15%, lasts for 2 turns, can stack. And then you have a 50% chance to trigger a secondary defense boost, and a 37% chance to trigger a tertiary defense boost. So, with luck, you can cast 3 small defense boosts with just 1 cast. And then on the second turn, you can cast some other defense boosts, and they will all stack. That's interesting, I guess. It is more defensive than you think about Leon, but I'll compare to Leon in a few. Because sometimes you may want to use Light Wall. That is a 7 VP skill. Well, he has 6 VP per turn, so that is actually easy to cast. That uses Guard Up Large. Guard Up Large decreases damage taken by 35% and lasts for 3 turns, alongside an end of turn recover of very small effect for 3 turns as well. So that Albert allows you to self-heal as well, because there's nothing here that helps with healing, and Leon is a character that allows you to heal. Then the skill number 1 is just a single target morale up skill that barely has an utility. But now it's time to compare him to Leon, because this is a meta character and people use him all the time. I know that Albert can cast more defense boosts, but you have to consider that Leon already decreases damage taken by 30% at all times since the start of the fight. The other difference is that Leon buffs all of your status by 20% on start of turn. Unless the enemy has something like remove your status on start of turn, this is actually very helpful. 20%. And remember that you need to attack with Albert squads in order to buff. Here it's different. You get it for free. Another thing that happens that makes Leon even more interesting is that you buff 5% of all of your status when you are hit. Different than Leon, Albert, that only buffs the offensive status. Buffing Endurance and Will, Love and Charisma actually helps a lot, because Leon is a character that allows you to heal as well. Remember Imperial Sun's Word, this one gives an attack and defense boost. The attack boost barely makes any difference, but it's also a skill that gives you a very small healing by the end of turn and 1 extra BP. If you cast this twice in a row, and alongside the other BP that you get every turn. Leon is providing 3 BP per turn that can help some other characters. The extra 3 BP per turn can also allow Leon to be used together with Albert, especially if you skip at the final Impress. You have to remember that they also work well together. And Leon is a much better healer because he already heals even 2 times because of Imperial Sun's word. Because he's buffing Love and Charisma, he also allows you to heal more, and he also has Merciful Light that recovers HP and will also give the end of turn healing, so that is actually pretty amazing. He recharges this every 5 turns, can keep casting this if needed, and also gives 5 BP when using this skill, so he's never losing anything. And he always changes with a skill that heals. All in all, this character can heal around 3 times per turn, while also healing more than other characters because of the status buffs. It's kind of like having a small healing every turn if you are using skill 3 all the time. And even if you skip one usage of skill 3, Merciful Light also casts in off-turn healing, and that's why it is so good. Leon is a BP battery and a HP healer alongside defense boosts. Albert defense boosts will be better. That is important. Even his offenses are better. He will give you much more damage because of the heat ups, because of the extreme increase for everyone. But his defense boost to be better than Leon needs air engine, and he does not generate extra BP, and he does not buff on start of turn. And you know, they barely do any damage, so if you want to bring both to a fight, you are probably decreasing your damage output, even if Albert is increasing a little bit of your damage. So it's hard to bring both. That's why I say that even though Albert's not really bad, he's nothing stellar as well. Especially if you already got Impress. Imagine having to bring those 3 characters together that don't do much damage. You will just have difficulty handling some situations. Unless you bring someone like Kihachi that does not even fit a Sun squad. But that's it. Albert is good now. I would say that he will receive a 4 out of 5. And when considering everything that he has to offer, because he was also buffed in global, but he will just fall out of meta extremely fast. If you have Leon, I feel like you have 0 reason to summon for Albert, and you should only consider Albert if you skip it Impress or Leon or both, and if you want someone else from the banner. As for inheritance, there's nothing that really stands out too much, but if you want, you can inherit Left Fork for damage to finish an enemy. This is a 5-hit skill that buffs STR and intelligence per hit. And from a Platinum style, there is Healing Light to recover someone in emergency situations. All in all, Albert is pretty skippable. The next one will be Jamil. This guy here is pretty interesting. We have 97% endurance and then 116% dexterity, 115% agility, and 116% intelligence. As you can see, all of these 3 status are the focus, and he just has okay defense capabilities. Now, there are plenty of different things about this character, and I will talk about the damage first. He has a 40% damage increase at all times, and he reduces damage taken by 30% at all times as well. And when he lands an attack, he recovers 1 BP. And then he has 3 different attacks that can be used as a chase. All of them have 50% chance to trigger, much like the latest Ellen, but it's not a stance that will trigger in this turn and the next. This is actually just stuff that randomly triggers, like Joe passives. Okay, so all of these attacks are pretty different, but they are focused on debuffing the enemy. Screwdriver plus 50% chance to trigger will debuff the enemy STR and agility by 15% with a triple S power attack. Then Gold Conductor is just double S power, and it will debuff the enemy intelligence by 15%, and then buff all characters' will by 20%. The third one, a cumulative shot, will then buff Jamil's dexterity, in this case by 20%, and then debuff the enemy's dexterity by 15%. As you can see, he's trying to debuff all the 4 primary status for damage. The enemy can use STR and agility for MRs and for all STR-based skills. He's trying to debuff intelligence for all spells, and also ailment chances, debuff chances, and then trying to debuff dexterity from dexterity-based skills. But since this is not guaranteed, it helps, but we need to talk about other stuff. When landing attacks, he will also grant himself and one random surviving ally an attack boost of a small effect that will last for 2 turns. The attack boost is pretty small, just 5% value and lasts for 2 turns, can stack. The defense boost is 15%, lasts for 2 turns and stack. But there is just a little bit of a problem. When it says random surviving ally, it can even be Jamil himself, so he can buff twice. And then, okay, let's talk about skill 1. Hurling Knives, it's an AoE attack with E power, and this one exists for a reason. The second one is Stinging Bind, and it is triple S roll attack with pierce damage that can paralyze. This skill here would not be used, I believe. And then the third one, called Ice Steel. That is a full AoE pierce attack that before attacking, if the enemy intelligence was not debuffed yet, it will then debuff the enemy intelligence by up to 40% on max level. It costs 10 BP and just has B power. Forget about the damage. It's about debuffing an enemy intelligence by up to 40%. This works if Jamil is fast enough. It does have good agility, and in situations where the enemy removes debuffs by end of turn, so that in all start of turns they have 0 debuffs. This also doesn't work well with people like Summer or Letta that has effects that triggers on the next turn. Okay, but then when he also lands an attack, he will then reduce the enemy status, save for love and charisma, by 10%, and then buff all the same status, save for love and charisma, by 15% to himself. This will then pass this passive to someone else. Yeah, this is a passive that triggers itself. It can be himself again. He will choose one of the 5 characters. If he is himself and he will chase, then he will then do the same thing again. Debuff the enemy and self buff. And then he will try to pass this passive to someone else. If it is someone that has already attacked, the passive dies. If it passes into someone that have not attacked yet, then when this character attacks, it will trigger the effects. Look, this is actually pretty amazing and complicated on the same time. Because he has high agility, that's nice, and he has a fast skill, he will usually go before anyone else. It's not a guarantee, there's RNG when deciding turn order. And he will debuff the enemy intelligence first by 40%, and then debuff all other status by 10%. So intelligence will be around at least minus 50%. And then he will decide if he wants to pass the skill back to himself or to someone else. If it's to himself, he does not chase, it also dies here. In very long fights, this can be bad, because there may be a turn where he won't go first, and then someone else will attack. Hopefully that someone else does not debuff intelligence, but then he attacks and passes his turn to someone that already attacked, and then he only debuffed the enemy by 10%. Okay, the intelligence debuff will usually be high. That is, if he can keep with his skill usage, it costs 10, and he only guarantees to himself 4 per turn, meaning that he also needs BP batteries. But in some good situations, when the fight is controlled and you are using the right formation, you will then be debuffing a lot of status of the enemy. That is, if the enemy also does not check debuffs and use Defy weakness, because that also happens when you debuff too much. Some enemies will trigger this on 50% debuff status or something similar. But this is also pretty much similar and made to compete with the latest Asellus. Well, Asellus only debuffs STR and intelligence. They are usually the best status to debuffs anyway, because they will cover most ground, and debuffing intelligence also allows you to protect versus ailments. That's also something that Jamil wants to do. But there is one thing about Asellus. Besides having a fast skill and debuffing the enemy herself, she passed Imperial Union that will allow everyone else in the party to debuff no matter turn order. That is much easier to handle. but she also has to go first. Look, her agility is 102%. But then the effects themselves are just for one turn as well. They also compete with Paulus. And Paulus is probably on similar ground to Jamil, in my opinion. Asellus is a little better. Paulus has lower agility than all of them, lower intelligence as well. But Paulus has one good thing about him, is that he allows everyone to debuff no matter the turn order. But they will debuff SGR and Endurance or Intelligence and Will, because it's based on direct or indirect attacks. Paulus has an AoE buff break, but even Asellus has buff break as well. Because of an inheritance, she can actually use it on overdrive so that she can keep using Pale Union and buff break the enemy via Rising Nova Plus. And now Jamil can do the same. Jamil can decide to buff break because of a skill that he can inherit. And that one is very good. Triple star. Look, triple S power attack with 10 BP cost and buffs break the enemy. So you can use it in some different situations. It's not bad, but it may take you some retries if RNG is against your favor. At least it does have very good agility nonetheless. And if you don't have enough PP, at least you still have Hurling Knives. That is an AoE attack, meaning that he's going to debuff all enemies. There are not that many hard challenges with multiple enemies, but they do exist and they will start to appear more often than not. So, a pretty interesting combination. If you don't want to use Ice Steel, he can also debuff other status via inheritances. For example, Screwdriver is free, it comes from his S style, and it debuffs SGR and agility on max level by 20%, with just 8 PP cost. Or you can also debuff like Dexterity with the same accumulative shot but as a main command that will buff his Dexterity by up to 30% on max level and debuff the enemy's Dexterity by 20%. He can also use, for example, Floral Cracker because it's 8 BP, and this one will use less BP in order to debuff other status if intelligence is not needed. But that's about it. Jamil is a very good debuffer, but also very RNG based. He does not fully replace Paulus, but he does compete with Asellus, but Asellus is better. I don't feel like you need to have all of them, but the good thing about Jamil is that he can be used on Remembrance Battle with As's Word Weapon, where there's no much competition. Nonetheless, I believe he deserves a 4.5 as one of the best debuffers. A lot of RNG, but still good. The next character here will be then Sif. Sif is an interesting case of damage alongside utility. Well, she starts with 14 BP. She has 136% STR, that's very high, close to 140%, that's the highest in the game right now. She does have good defenses with 110% volleys and 100% agility for damage dealer, more than enough, because she also debuffs the enemy resistance. When she attacks, she recovers 1 BP, and she has 1 damage reduction passive that works all the time, and it decreases damage taken by 40%. For damage, she has 4 stacks of weak heat up, so she needs to land weak attacks, and that gets up to 200% damage increase on turn 4 onwards. She has an extra 20%, and that's it. When landing overdrive attacks or weak attacks, she has a very, very interesting gimmick. She self-debuffs STR by 15%, but then she chases 2 times with this skill called Ice Smack Strike. And that is a very powerful attack. It costs 14 BP as a command. It is slashing code, hits 4 times with just E power, but it grants the enemy a defense down. It will be 10% defense down because of rank 1. But then, if you are on turn 4 wards, damage is gonna hurt. And it's 2 times. Each hit will land a defense down on the enemy. It's kinda like using Sif for damage and Sunder effect at the same time. So the problem is that this is not a fast skill. Her agility is not as high as it could have been, meaning that you won't always attack before your other attackers with Sif. But even then, it's a guaranteed damage that you get all the time, and you could say that it's kind of similar to Fake Gustav. Fake Gustav has a guaranteed chase of skill 3 that hits 4 times, this time with C power. He does damage to the allies' HP, but he has even higher damage potential. So I would say that the damage of Sif will be even higher than Fake Gustav, but not much. Pretty similar, because Fake Gustav does just one chase, but he also has the second skill that is absurdly strong and also recovers everyone's HP. In my opinion, Fake Gustav is better, but something else needs to be considered as well. It's that, in the end, Sif is also allowing everyone else to do more damage. Okay, but then, there's more. Besides chasing with this when OG or weak attacks, when you land an OG attack, then she will buff all surviving allies' attack and defense boosts. JP says that the attack boost is of 15% value and the defense boost is of 20% value. Okay, she is a character that will get into overdrive in 2 or 3 turns without support. So, turn 3, for example, turn 6, but she will actually be better off using people that gives her OG points, because right after casting the overdrive attack, she guarantees 25 points on the end of that same turn, alongside 1 extra BP, cleans all ailments, debuffs, and that's it. Cleansing debuffs is also nice because it will remove all the SGR debuffs she applied to herself, because that allows her to reset. If you are using other buffers in the party, that's okay, she's already probably getting back. But if you have someone like Shirei together with Sif, it's already giving her extra OG points, or Darius or any other, so that she tries to get into overdrive every 2 turns. That would be much better if possible. So that's okay. At least this one gives OG points on the end of turn, and if she attacks on overdrive, she can still get OG points by being hit by the enemy. The only problem is that Ice Axe Mad Strike does not give too much OG gauge. Here JP says that it's just 3 points as a command. And as a command, well, you'll be debuffing the defense of the enemy by 15%. Damage won't improve much because it's still just E power though. Okay, she also has an Ice Axe attack that is a free AoE attack. That doesn't really matter. And then the second skill, Great Axe Flash, will hardly be used, but it's a morale up skill that will increase damage potential by 50% for 5 turns. And then casts Dangerous Spin. Dangerous Spin is a slash and blunt attack, you can see here, with just double S power. Because Ice Mad Axe Strike debuffs the defense of the enemy, it's usually much better to keep using this one instead, so that all new hit will do more damage. And it's Slash and Cold. This combination is much better than Slash and Blunt. Well, Sif has a second skill called Great Axe Flash, that is a roll attack with D power, and then she casts Morale Up very large, increasing damage potential by 40% for 5 turns, and chases with Dangerous Spin. That is a double S power attack with Slash and Blunt. It will feel more in line like a 4S power attack, and the only benefit is to keep that Morale Up very large for the older turns, but then you will have difficulty keeping up with so much BP cost. But then using Ice Axe Mad Strike will do more damage. But I don't feel like this is needed, and it's Slash and Blunt, while Ice Mad Strike is Slash and Cold. But Sif falls off because she's competing with the giant Kihachi. Even the first Kihachi is still extremely strong if you don't look on the numbers. Look, she doesn't have much endurance or will, but now she can inherit from the newest Kihachi, and people did summon for all Kihachis, most people did, and she can now apply a defense up of 15% damage reduction, she can get a heat up of 20% damage increase, and then cast full overdrive 4 turns in a row and extra BP. And Kihachi has Laceration that is kind of busted. Well, all in all, the defense is down from Sif decreases defense by 10%. Laceration from Kihachi has 35% chance to debuff 35% value. So all in all, it's more about the number of hits, and Kihachi has double the number of hits. She can use a 8-hit skill and chase 2 times with an 8-hit skill, meaning that even if Sif hits are stronger by the sheer number of hits and defense downs, Kihachi offers more. And if you have both Kihachis, you have Slash, Cold, and Lightning for damage types. And Well, there's no way that Sif can beat Kihachi, but she's probably the character that gets super close because she has Slash and Code as well. If you miss it out on the first Kihachi, Sif becomes much more interesting, but if you have Kihachi, there's zero reason to go for Sif. Even then, she's a strong damage dealer without party support, and can inherit at least one skill that will be okay for inheritances. That is Whale Plus, that buffs SGR and Will by 25%, and can use it on Remembrance fights that allow you to buff. So she deals less damage, but buffing can help on Axe Remembrance. There's not much characters that help with defense there. And the reason why Sif is still okay is because she's wielding an axe. She's the strongest axe damage dealer now. But if you have Ellen, I also feel like you are good to go, because Ellen is also a master debuffer that also relies on BP generation and has similar damage output with RNG. Usually Sif will do more, but well, damage is easy to replace anyway. So right now, I would say that Sif deserves a 4 out of 5, but is still skippable for most players. Moving on to Claudia, the last one here, and this Claudia has 130% dexterity, 108% endurance will finally, because all of her styles had insanely bad endurance, with 107% agility too. This character has plenty of different effects, but weak hit-ups, with 30% increasing damage for the whole fight, that triggers 4 times for a total of 120%, alongside 5 VP per turn. She still gets 30% damage reduction at all times, alongside 25% chance to evade. When landing an attack, she always chases with Emerald Super Shot. Emerald Super Shot is her skill tree. It's a 9 VP cost skill that has this pierce attack boost as well. When you use it as command, it buffs 55% damage, and using as chase is 45%, but it only lasts for that turn. Okay, but still, triple S chase guarantees not that bad. Then on odd turns, she casts herself this clear focus that makes it so that all of her skills will land critical. Critical increases your damage by 20%, and then attack boost of 30% damage increase. The morale up will increase your damage by 40% for that turn. She also gets 1 free evasion for that turn and extra 4 BP, so that she can actually use her best skills and without problems. 70% increase, but actually 90% because of the critical enhance. Not bad, right? This skill can also be found on the newest Claudia on the ads system. Yeah, if you watch her ads, you can get the Serenity skill, and this one will trigger 4 times if you use it. It's free to use, and in turns where she has it from passive, you have double the effects. But the thing here is, the critical enhance and the morale up cannot stack. So you only get the extra 30% damage increase, the extra 4 BP, and the extra evasion. I'm not so sure if this is useful because you are going to waste 1 turn without attacking, but it's something to consider. Then, when she is on even turns, she can chase again with Dream Shot Plus. And Dream Shot Plus is a strong attack. Triple S power, just pierce damage, and buffs her dexterity by 30%. After the attack, not before. Still okay. In those even turns, she has 2 chases of triple S power, and both chases will increase her damage output somehow. And now, when she chases with Emerald Super Shot, that is the guaranteed chase, she then has a 50% chance to trigger the same chase again, and then I believe that she can trigger it yet again, and yet again, and yet again, if you are lucky. 50% chance to do so. It is similar to Tambora. Remember Tambora? Well, that had a way to keep triggering Ignition Drive because of the Farclad Axe. You needed to cast this, so you can see how Power Creep moves so fast. Now you don't even need to cast, but you have this chance to keep chasing with Claudia. But nonetheless, she's just a pierce damage dealer. But let's see the other skills. There's Guardian, Bow, that has piercing cold damage and can cast Guard Up, decreasing damage taken by 25% for that turn. It's just something that you use on turns that you don't have BP. And there is also Bloom Rain, an old skill but still good. It's Column and double S power. Recovers HP of everyone by around 300 and buffs Dexterity by 25%. It is Pierce and Sun because Sun can help trigger effects with Sun-based squads, but I still believe it's okay to use if you don't have that much BP, because it gives parts utility. But Claudia is just damage, and when you consider that she's a bow user, and if you got Zealing, well, Zealing is very strong, and she also buffs STR and Dexterity when she attacks. And she has a chance to chase the skill number 2, Dance of Light Birds. So her damage is not as strong as Claudia, but since she buffs her status and the party status as well, she is very useful anyway. And besides Zealing, there is also Therese. Therese is much better because she applies a lot of other effects to the party, especially defense boosts. But there was also some other bow units recently like Shahrazad and Eerie, so I don't know, maybe there's no much need of other bow units right now. And there is a free version of Claudia that you can get from Ad System that has very poor defenses, but if you're just talking about the normal Remembrance battles and not the Megalith Dragon, she may still work anyway. Okay, so in the end, this Claudia is just about damage, and I don't think those units are that good anymore, because she is still a little bit of RNG based. It's easier to skip. Claudia has a lot of different inheritances that can help with Remembrance. Like, for example, she has Instant Kill for Siegfried, Paralyzes for Real Queen. She also has Charm, Instant Kill as well. So many of different situations where she will work, but none of these inheritances make too much sense with this Claudia. She actually just wants to keep using her skill 3 or skill 2. There's nothing else. So I think she deserves a 3 out of 5, and it's not that important. Now, back to the banner image. Is this banner worth summoning for? In my opinion, no. Why? The best characters here are competing with others. They are not the best on what they are doing. Albert is not as good as Leon, Sif is not as good as Kihachi, Cloud is not as good as other bow units, and Jamil is not better than Asellus. So no one here is a prime style. And because Sif competes with the best damage dealer, it's super easy to skip her, and Albert competes with one of the best supports, it's super easy to skip him. But if you are a fan of the characters, it's not that they are bad, it's just that they don't offer much more than the other characters that we have. So I will give it a silver award because it still has 4 units that they are not bad, but I recommend skipping this banner unless you want Jamil, because he is the one that will give you the best utility. He can help you defeat the 7 heroes fight because he's a debuffer that focuses on physical damage, and he can also debuff via physical types. He will not cleanse the debuffs because of the effects of the bosses. So he's the best one, and then I would say Sif is the second best, Albert the third best, and Claudia is whatever. So I will skip this banner because the other one offers a little more value overall because of Hulk being a top tier unit, but you decide. Those are my opinions. What is yours? Please say here in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't, and I hope to see you soon in the next video or live stream. Goodbye.